My office was a sanctuary of muted tones and logical order. The walls were a pale gray, the desk meticulously cleared save for my dual monitors and a single, unadorned succulent. As the head of data analytics, my world thrived on precision. Every graph, every report, every pivot table was a testament to the satisfying clarity of numbers. I was Carolyn, and I believed in facts, not feelings, especially in the workplace. From my perch on the fifth floor, the city outside my window hummed with predictable chaos, a stark contrast to the quiet hum of my department. We dealt in certainty, in patterns, in the calm assurance that data would always tell the truth. That's why Kathy, the head of marketing, was such a recurring, vibrant, and utterly jarring anomaly in my carefully constructed professional landscape. She arrived each morning like a tropical storm, all bright colors and boisterous energy. Her department, located on the floor below, might as well have been another planet. I often caught glimpses of her in the elevator bank or striding through the open-plan office, a whirlwind of motion. She favored bold, clashing patterns, scarves that looked like they belonged in an art gallery, and a laugh that seemed to echo just a little too loudly in the otherwise subdued corporate corridors. Her dark, expressive eyes, framed by thick lashes, seemed to miss nothing, and she had this way of tilting her head slightly when she listened, as if every word spoken was a fascinating puzzle. I found it utterly distracting. Our interactions were almost exclusively confined to cross-departmental meetings, which, for me, felt less like collaboration and more like a gladiatorial arena. Take, for instance, last week's quarterly review. We were discussing the rollout of a new product, and the air in the conference room was already thick with unspoken tension. Carolyn, can you walk us through the projected market penetration based on your segmentation analysis? Mr. Harrison, our VP, had asked, his voice smooth and expectant. I clicked to the next slide, my voice even practiced. Based on our predictive models, targeting demographics X and Y, we'll see a conservative 3.5% initial penetration. Aggressive, but achievable within the first fiscal quarter. We've factored in current market saturation and competitor activity. I gestured to the neat, color-coded charts, the lines converging exactly where they should. Logic, pure and simple. Then Kathy spoke, her voice cutting through the dry air with an almost tangible warmth. And what about the why, Carolyn? Your numbers are beautiful, truly. But our campaign is about emotion, about connection. We believe there's an untapped demographic, C, that your models might be overlooking. They're responsive to narrative, not just data points. She leaned forward slightly, her colorful scarf, a riot of oranges and blues, shifting with the movement. We're proposing a narrative-driven campaign, less about the product's features and more about its impact on lifestyle. Our focus groups showed a significant emotional resonance there. I felt a familiar tightening in my chest. Emotional resonance isn't a metric, Kathy. It's an intangible. My models are built on historical data, on consumer behavior that can be quantified and predicted. To pivot towards a narrative for an untapped demographic C, with no proven buying power in this sector, would be a substantial risk. It's an intuitive leap, not a calculated one. My gaze swept across the room, seeking validation, finding it in the slight nods from the finance team. Kathy's smile didn't falter, but her dark eyes held a glint of challenge. Sometimes, Carolyn, the biggest rewards come from the intuitive leaps. Data can tell you where we've been, but sometimes a good story is what points to where we're going. She held my gaze, a silent battle of wills playing out across the polished conference table. The room shifted uncomfortably, and Mr. Harrison smoothly intervened, calling for a blended approach. But the message was clear. Kathy and I operated on entirely different planes. I saw her as reckless, relying on gut feelings and charismatic rhetoric. She, no doubt, saw me as rigid, confined by my spreadsheets, incapable of seeing beyond the numbers. The wall between us felt solid, built brick by brick with every disagreement, every perceived slight. I dismissed her as a disruption, a colorful chaos I had to tolerate. And yet, there was something in her unwavering conviction, The way her whole being seemed to light up when she spoke about her vision, that occasionally, for a fleeting moment, snagged my attention, a tiny, almost imperceptible snag in the fabric of my disinterest. It was a feeling I immediately tried to ignore. The new product launch, ironically dubbed Project Nexus, a name that suggested connection but only amplified our divisions, quickly became the focal point of our professional rivalry. It was a high-stakes endeavor, demanding unprecedented collaboration between data analytics and marketing. For me, it was an exercise in controlled exasperation. Every strategy meeting with Kathy felt like pulling teeth, or perhaps more accurately, like trying to categorize a tornado. My team, meticulously trained in predictive algorithms and trend analysis, worked with precise timelines and verifiable metrics. Kathy's team, on the other hand, seemed to operate on a different rhythm entirely. Their whiteboards were a riot of scribbled ideas, colorful post-it notes, and arrows pointing in a dozen directions. Their energy was infectious, I had to admit, but also, to my mind, utterly undisciplined. "We need to push the early access window to capitalize on the holiday buzz," Kathy declared during one particularly grueling cross-departmental review. Her voice was typically enthusiastic, a bright counterpoint to the drone of the projector. She gestured animatedly to a slide filled with vibrant, emotionally charged mock-ups. "Our social media buzz is peaking right now. The sentiment analysis is off the charts. We strike while the iron's hot." I took a deep breath, my fingers instinctively tightening around the pen I held. "Kathy, the data clearly shows that rushing the early access could lead to a significant drop in user satisfaction. Our beta testers reported several critical bugs just yesterday. My team's projections indicate that a phased rollout, allowing for an additional 3 weeks of bug fixes and optimization, would result in a 12% higher long-term retention rate. Sacrificing stability for immediate buzz is short-sighted." My voice was calm, but the effort to keep it so was immense. She met my gaze across the table, her dark eyes flashing with a familiar fire. "And I'm saying that if we wait 3 weeks, that buzz dissipates. That's 3 weeks for a competitor to swoop in. Sometimes, Carolyn, you have to trust the momentum, the feeling of the market. Not every variable can be neatly contained in a spreadsheet." Her words were punctuated by a definitive tap on the table. The ensuing debate was a familiar dance. I presented charts and figures, she presented narratives and testimonials. The room often felt caught in the crossfire, with Mr. Harrison eventually steering us towards a compromise that left neither of us fully satisfied. It was exhausting, yet there were moments, fleeting and unwelcome, when I found myself observing Kathy more closely than I intended. Once, during a particularly fraught discussion about target demographics, a junior member of her team stumbled over their presentation. Kathy, rather than showing irritation, had stepped in smoothly, rephrasing their points, adding context, and bolstering their confidence with a quick, reassuring smile. She wasn't just a firebrand, she was fiercely loyal to her team, a quality I grudgingly respected. Another time, I overheard her passionately articulating a campaign vision to a hesitant stakeholder, her words weaving a compelling story that even I, with my numbers, found myself listening to. She had a way of cutting through the noise, distilling complex ideas into powerful, resonant messages. It was effective, undeniable. These observations chipped away, ever so slightly, at my rigid perception of her. I tried to dismiss them as anomalies, as a mere side effect of prolonged exposure. But they lingered, small inconsistencies that poked holes in the clean, simple narrative I had created for Kathy in my mind. She was supposed to be the chaotic foil, the one I could easily dislike. Yet, these tiny moments of undeniable competence and genuine care created a dissonance I couldn't quite resolve. My internal struggle had begun, a quiet, almost imperceptible shift beneath the surface. The pressure of Project Nexus continued to mount, its complexities growing with each passing day. My department was responsible for the core data modeling, the financial projections, the very bedrock of the launch. The weight of that responsibility felt heavy, a constant hum of anxiety beneath my calm demeanor. I triple-checked every calculation, every parameter, but even precision has its limits, especially when dealing with the unpredictable currents of a dynamic market. The looming deadline was a relentless drumbeat, pushing me to the very edge of my capacity, unknowingly setting the stage for a critical misstep. The air in my office felt thick and suffocating, each breath a conscious effort. It was a Tuesday, late afternoon, but the light filtering through my window seemed to mock the darkness that had descended upon my world. The numbers on my screen, usually my solace, now swam before my eyes like a mocking, jumbled mess. A mistake. A colossal, unforgivable error. It had started subtly enough. A nagging inconsistency in the Q3 projections, a deviation in the long-term revenue forecast that my gut, usually so reliable, had dismissed as an outlier. But as I dug deeper, cross-referencing datasets, tracing the labyrinthine paths of the algorithms, the truth slowly, horrifyingly, solidified. A single, misplaced variable in the initial data input, a human error that my meticulous checks had somehow missed, had cascaded through the entire model, subtly skewing every subsequent projection for Project Nexus. The estimated loss, should the launch proceed based on my faulty data, was substantial. Catastrophic, even. A cold dread seeped into my bones, colder than any winter wind. My heart hammered a frantic rhythm against my ribs, a stark contrast to the quiet composure I usually maintained. My carefully constructed world of order had just crumbled, and I was the architect of its downfall. Shame, hot and bitter, washed over me. I, Carolyn, the bastion of accuracy, had made a mistake of this magnitude. The logical part of my brain, the part one relied on most, immediately began calculating damage control, but it was overshadowed by a wave of raw, visceral fear. What would Mr. Harrison say? What would everyone say? My reputation, years in the making, would be shattered. And then, a new dread set in. Kathy. I could almost hear her boisterous laugh echoing in the silence of my office. This was it, wasn't it? The perfect ammunition. All those times I had criticized her intuitive leaps, her unquantifiable emotions. Now my quantifiable facts had failed spectacularly. She would sweep in, her vibrant presence filling my muted space, her dark eyes alight with a triumphant, mocking gleam. She would relish this. She would point to my spreadsheets, to my cold, hard data, and demand to know where my logic had gone. I braced myself, my shoulders rigid, my jaw clenched. I imagined her leaning against my doorframe, arms crossed, a knowing smirk playing on her lips. She would make some cutting remark, something about all that precision for nothing, or maybe a little emotion would have caught that error. I deserved it, I told myself. I had been so smug, so certain of my own infallibility. The thought of facing her, of enduring her anticipated scorn, was almost as debilitating as the error itself. I pictured her confident posture, the way her colorful clothing seemed to mock my own subdued attire, her easy laugh, all poised to deliver the final blow. My office door, which I had left ajar in my frantic stupor, creaked softly. I flinched, my head snapping up. There she was. Kathy. But she wasn't leaning, wasn't smirking. She stood just inside the doorway, her usual bright clothing a little subdued today, a deep teal blouse instead of her usual riot of patterns. Her hands were not crossed in triumph, but clasped loosely in front of her. Her dark eyes, usually so animated, were uncharacteristically soft, scanning my face with an unreadable expression. There was no hint of the victorious taunt I had steeled myself for. Only a quiet stillness. "Carolyn," she asked, her voice hushed, almost hesitant. Not the booming declaration I expected, but a gentle inquiry. "Is everything all right? I saw Mr. Harrison leaving your office a moment ago, and, well, you looked like you'd just seen a ghost." I stared at her, utterly disarmed. My carefully constructed defenses, ready for battle, found no target. Her presence, instead of being the anticipated onslaught, felt like a question mark. My breath hitched. This wasn't the Kathy I knew. This wasn't the Kathy I had prepared for. The sudden, unexpected empathy in her voice, in her eyes, felt like a jarring note in the cacophony of my self-reproach, a crack in the wall of my shame I hadn't even realized was there. My voice, when it finally emerged, was a strained whisper, barely audible in the quiet of my office.
No, Kathy.
Everything is far from all right. My gaze dropped back to the damning figures on my screen. I gestured vaguely towards them, unable to articulate the full scope of my blunder. A calculation error. Significant. Potentially very costly for Project Nexus. Kathy didn't move. She simply took a step further into the room, her eyes following my gesture to the screen. I braced myself for the "I told you so" that still lingered in the air, a ghost of my own expectations. But it never came. Instead, she walked around my desk, slowly, quietly, until she stood beside me, looking at the data. Her proximity, usually a source of irritation, was now simply present. She spent several long minutes scrutinizing the figures, her brow furrowed in concentration. Her dark eyes, usually so vibrant, were now serious, analytical, tracing the lines of the graphs with an intensity that surprised me. I watched her, a knot of confusion and a strange, unfamiliar relief beginning to loosen in my chest. The silence stretched, broken only by the soft hum of my computer. Finally, she straightened up, her expression unreadable. "Okay," she said, her voice calm, devoid of judgment. "This isn't good, but it's not insurmountable, Carolyn. This is what it is." She paused, then added, "We can fix this. Or, at least, we can minimize the damage." I looked at her, utterly stunned. "We?" The word felt foreign on my tongue. "Kathy, this is my mistake. My department's mistake. I wouldn't expect you to." She cut me off, her gaze steady, unwavering. "When the company takes a hit, we all take a hit, Carolyn. And when a project like Nexus is on the line, there's no room for departmental silos. We're on the same team, even if we sometimes forget it." A faint, almost imperceptible smile touched the corners of her lips. "Besides, you're good with numbers. I'm good with people. Maybe between the two of us, we can brainstorm a way out of this mess." And so we began. What followed were some of the most intense, grueling hours of my professional life, yet also the most unexpectedly collaborative. We ordered takeout that grew cold on the corner of my desk. The soft glow of my monitors illuminated our faces as the night deepened outside. My logical analysis, usually so rigid, found an unexpected compliment in Kathy's creative problem-solving. She saw angles I missed, suggested ways to reframe the narrative for stakeholders, even identified potential external factors that my internal models hadn't accounted for. She pulled up market trend reports from her own department, offering insights into consumer behavior that could inform a revised projection. What if we adjust the Q3 forecast by isolating the impact of the competitor's new offering? She suggested, pointing to a column of figures. We could frame the initial lower projection as a strategic, conservative approach, allowing for a stronger, more stable growth curve in Q4 once we've refined the user experience. It turns a vulnerability into a deliberate strategy. I listened, my analytical mind whirring. Her ideas were unconventional. Yes, but they were also brilliant. Together, we meticulously reevaluated data, rear-end simulations, and crafted a new, meticulously detailed mitigation plan. Her dark, expressive eyes, which I had always found so intimidating, now conveyed a surprising warmth and resolve, focusing intently on the problem at hand, seeing possibilities where I had only seen failure. As the hours bled into the early morning, something fundamental shifted between us. The professional animosity, the silent disdain, dissolved under the relentless pressure of a shared crisis. There were moments of quiet camaraderie, a shared sigh of exhaustion, a knowing look exchanged after a particularly convoluted calculation finally yielded a sensible result. When a difficult graph finally clicked into place, a sense of shared relief passed between us, a silent understanding. At one point, I found myself rubbing my temples, my eyes burning with fatigue. Kathy, without a word, pushed a bottle of water across the desk to me. "Hydrate, Carolyn," she said, her voice soft. "We're not done yet." It was a small gesture, but it landed with surprising impact. It wasn't a truce. It was a partnership, forged in the crucible of my worst professional nightmare. By the time the sun began to paint the sky with a soft, forgiving light, we had a comprehensive, viable solution. The damage was still there, but it was contained, manageable. As we gathered our notes, preparing to present our findings to Mr. Harrison, a strange, almost unsettling sense of gratitude swelled within me. I looked at Kathy, her hair a little disheveled, her bright blouse slightly wrinkled, but her eyes still holding that unwavering resolve. "Kathy," I said, the words feeling inadequate. "Thank you. I don't know what I would have done without you." She offered a tired but genuine smile. "We're good, Carolyn. We're a team." The simplicity of her words resonated deeply. It was a bridge, carefully constructed, spanning the chasm that had once separated us. News of our collaboration, of her unexpected support, would undoubtedly ripple through the office, leaving a trail of whispered questions and genuine surprise. But for me, the biggest surprise was the profound shift I felt within, the quiet breaking of a wall I hadn't known could fall. The fallout from my error was, thankfully, minimized. Our joint presentation to Mr. Harrison had been a success, turning a potential disaster into a testament to swift, collaborative problem-solving. The company recovered, and my reputation, though momentarily tarnished, was largely salvaged. But more significantly, the professional landscape between Kathy and me had irrevocably changed. The invisible wall had crumbled, leaving behind an open, unexpected space. The initial shock of our colleagues at seeing us not just coexisting, but actively cooperating, was almost comical. Heads would turn in meetings when I'd nod in agreement with one of Kathy's points, or when she'd quietly defer to my data on a strategic decision. The whispered questions and curious glances were a constant backdrop, but we both seemed to exist in a bubble of our own making. Our work relationship, once marked by friction, now hummed with a surprising synergy. We started having coffee together before the main team meetings, discussing project nuances with a newfound ease. These weren't just professional exchanges anymore. They gradually morphed into something more. Lunch breaks, once solitary affairs for me, became shared ventures. We'd venture out to the small deli across the street, the aroma of roasted garlic and fresh bread a comforting constant as we talked. I found myself learning about her life outside the office, her love for obscure indie films, her passion for urban gardening, the slightly chaotic but deeply loved family she often spoke of. And in turn, I slowly, cautiously, revealed parts of myself I usually kept hidden: my quiet enjoyment of classical music, my weekend hikes in the nearby state park, the challenges of living alone in a city that often felt too big. It was during these extended conversations that the subtle shift began to manifest. A playful banter developed, lighthearted and easy, yet laced with an undeniable undercurrent. My analytical mind, ever seeking patterns, couldn't ignore the lingering eye contact that held a touch more warmth than strictly professional. A casual brush of hands when reaching for the same sugar packet at the coffee machine would send a curious, unfamiliar feeling through me. A compliment like, "That's a really smart observation, Carolyn," delivered by Kathy with a genuine smile, suddenly felt unusually personal, like a secret shared. I started noticing things I'd previously dismissed. The way her dark, curly hair framed her face, often escaping its casual tieback in playful tendrils. The unique shade of hazel in her eyes that seemed to deepen with genuine amusement. The way she unconsciously tapped her pen against her chin when deep in thought, a small, endearing habit. Her laugh, which I once found boisterous, now held a certain infectious quality, a warmth that could somehow cut through my own quietude. I found myself scrutinizing her every move, her every gesture, trying to decode the new language that seemed to be forming between us. This entirely unfamiliar connection was both exhilarating and terrifying. My mind, a fortress of logic, found itself under siege by feelings I couldn't quantify, couldn't predict. Carolyn, who meticulously avoided emotional entanglements, was drawn to the very person I had once actively disliked. It was a logical, inconvenient, and utterly compelling. I battled my own logic, my professional boundaries, and the lingering shadows of past hurts that had kept me emotionally guarded for so long. Every late-night email exchange, every shared smile across a meeting room, every quiet moment of understanding became a data point in an increasingly complex algorithm of my own emotions. I analyzed her words, her actions, searching for reciprocal signals, caught in a delicate, almost agonizing dance of advance and retreat. Did she feel it too? Or was I simply projecting my own burgeoning, bewildering feelings onto our newfound camaraderie? The questions buzzed in my mind, a relentless, captivating hum that refused to be silenced. The wall was gone, but now I stood on unfamiliar ground, staring at a landscape I hadn't known existed. The office, usually a hive of activity during the day, felt almost sacred in the quiet hours after everyone else had departed. The fluorescent lights hummed with a softer glow, and the distant murmur of the city replaced the earlier cacophony. It was during these twilight moments, when we were often the last two remaining, that the unspoken tension between Kathy and me became almost a tangible presence, a silken thread weaving around us. Our conversations deepened, moving far beyond project deadlines and market strategies. We spoke about the nuanced loneliness of living in a big city, the quiet comfort of our childhood homes, the dreams we held for ourselves that sometimes felt too fragile to voice. Kathy, with her open, expressive nature, found ways to coax vulnerabilities from me I hadn't realized I possessed. She spoke of the pressure she felt to always be on, to project an image of unyielding confidence, revealing a quiet vulnerability beneath her vibrant exterior. One particularly rainy evening, we were reviewing some final marketing creatives for a new campaign. The rain lashed against the windows, creating a soothing rhythm. We had settled into the comfortable silence that now punctuated our discussions, a quiet understanding that bypassed the need for constant words. Kathy had been talking about her late grandmother, a woman she described as a force of nature, who taught her the importance of seeing beauty in unexpected places. Her voice was soft, laced with a gentle melancholy. She always said, Kathy murmured, her gaze fixed on the rain-streaked window, that sometimes the most important things are found not in what you look for, but in what you stumble upon. That the greatest connections happen when you stop trying to control every variable. She turned from the window then, her dark eyes finding mine. The usual sparkle was subdued, replaced by a profound, almost raw sincerity. She taught me to trust my gut, even when the numbers didn't quite line up. To feel things, even when they were messy. I listened, absorbing her words, seeing the unspoken grief, the profound love in her expression. It was a window into a part of her soul she rarely exposed. My own guarded nature, usually so quick to retreat, found itself softening, drawn in by her honesty. It was as if she had offered me a fragile, precious thing, and my only instinct was to hold it carefully. A memory stirred within me, a quiet echo of a time when I had been less guarded, before a particular heartbreak had taught me to build my walls high and thick. I found myself speaking a low, hesitant confession I hadn't shared with anyone in years. My parents, they always valued order, predictability. Emotional displays were seen as unproductive. I learned early on to keep things contained, to find solace in logic. I paused, the words feeling heavy, yet strangely liberating. But it also meant I learned to build walls, to keep everyone out, even when I probably shouldn't have. I met her gaze, feeling a profound, terrifying vulnerability. The air between us thrummed with the unspoken weight of our shared confessions. Kathy didn't offer platitudes or empty reassurances. She simply nodded, a slow, understanding movement. Her eyes, filled with an empathetic warmth, seemed to truly see me, perhaps more clearly than anyone ever had. In that moment, the carefully constructed facade I presented to the world felt translucent, almost non-existent. A profound sense of trust, earned not through grand gestures, but through quiet, shared vulnerability, settled between us. The rain continued its gentle drumming against the glass. The office was silent save for that, and the soft hum of the computers. Kathy, still looking at me, slowly reached out her hand. Her fingers brushed against my arm, a light, almost imperceptible touch. My breath hitched. She moved closer, just a fraction, her eyes never leaving mine, a silent question in their depths. The space between us tightened, filled with a magnetic pull. And then she closed the distance. A soft, brief moment of connection, a silent affirmation of the bond we'd built. It was gentle, tentative, and deeply meaningful. When she pulled back slightly, her eyes still searching mine, the silence that followed was rich with understanding, leaving an indelible mark on my heart. The world outside had ceased to exist. The connection had been an anchor, pulling me from the swirling waters of my logical mind into an entirely new current. When Kathy gently pulled back, her dark eyes, still so close, held a depth I hadn't seen before, reflecting the shock and wonder I knew must be mirrored in my own. The air between us crackled with a silent acknowledgement, a shared secret born in the quiet of the office. We didn't speak immediately. Words felt inadequate, clumsy, incapable of capturing the seismic shift that had just occurred. Instead, we simply looked at each other, the understanding passing between us a language far more profound than any spoken dialogue. There was a faint, almost imperceptible tremor in her hand as it lingered near mine. My own heart still hammered, a frantic drum against the silence. It was a moment suspended in time, fragile and immensely powerful. Finally, Kathy offered a soft, almost imperceptible smile, her gaze still unwavering. It was a smile that held 1,000 unspoken questions, and just as many unspoken answers. And in that smile, I saw not the bold, boisterous Kathy I had initially judged, but a woman of profound emotional depth, capable of immense vulnerability. My own response was a slight nod, a silent assent, a complete and utter surrender to the inexplicable pull I felt toward her. From that moment, our connection deepened with a breathtaking intensity. It wasn't about grand declarations. It was about the small, quiet intimacies that wove themselves into the fabric of our days. A shared glance across a crowded meeting room, a look that conveyed a world of understanding. A hand placed gently on my arm as we walked to the elevator, a touch that offered reassurance and quiet strength. The way she would sometimes linger at my office doorway, her presence a comforting weight, before finally leaving for the day. We started spending evenings together, not just in the office, but sometimes venturing out, finding hidden corners of the city that felt like our own. These were not traditional dates. They were extensions of our conversations, explorations of each other's inner worlds. We walked through quiet parks as twilight descended, the distant city lights blurring into soft halos. We sat in small, independent bookstores, the scent of old paper and new possibilities, filling the air as we shared thoughts on a particular author. These were moments of profound emotional and spiritual closeness, where the world outside their shared space completely faded. It was about being utterly present, utterly seen. With Kathy, the carefully constructed walls around my heart began to dismantle, brick by painful brick. She possessed an intuitive ability to understand my unspoken fears, to draw out the guarded parts of me without ever pushing too hard. She was patient, her presence a steady anchor in the unfamiliar storm of my emotions. I found myself revealing more about my past, about the heartbreak that had convinced me to retreat into the safe, logical world of data, about the quiet loneliness that had become my constant companion. In return, she shared her own struggles, her own doubts, the moments where her outward confidence faltered. We didn't need words for everything. Sometimes a shared silence, a simple touch, conveyed more than any elaborate speech. It was a profound sense of comfort, of belonging, of being truly seen and accepted for every messy, imperfect part of myself. The emphasis was on the emotional surrender, the trust, and the deep, silent language we now shared, a language built on understanding and mutual acceptance. I was acutely aware of the professional boundaries, the societal expectations, the inherent complexities of our developing relationship. The risk was palpable. Falling for a colleague, let alone the colleague who had once been my nemesis, felt like tempting fate. There was a quiet anxiety that hummed beneath the surface of my newfound joy. But the profound sense of healing and connection I found with Kathy, the way her presence offered solace and strength, outweighed the fear. She wasn't just a distraction. She was a catalyst. Kathy, the woman I once despised for her perceived chaos, had become my most unexpected confidant, my quiet harbor, and the profound source of comfort I hadn't known I needed. She had seen me at my most vulnerable, in the throes of my professional failure, and instead of judgment, she had offered unwavering support. She had broken down my walls not with force, but with understanding, with patience, with an open heart. I felt a profound shift within myself, moving away from my guarded, isolated existence towards a more open, more vulnerable, and undeniably more connected self. It was a transformation I hadn't sought, but one I now embraced with a quiet, fierce joy. The journey with Kathy was less a destination and more an ongoing exploration. The unspoken understanding between us had solidified into a comfortable, powerful force that permeated our daily lives, both within and outside the office. We navigated the professional landscape with an unspoken synchronicity, our bond a quiet, personal world existing just beneath the surface of corporate life. In meetings, our gazes would sometimes meet across the table, a silent communication passing between us that only we understood. A quick, almost imperceptible smile would play on Kathy's lips when I offered a particularly incisive data point, or a subtle nod would cross my face when she delivered a compelling marketing strategy. Colleagues might have sensed a change, an undeniable shift in the energy between us, a new ease and mutual respect that went beyond mere professional courtesy. But the true depth of our connection, the profound emotional closeness we now shared, remained our private world, cherished and protected. We continued our evening walks, our quiet dinners, our shared moments in the hushed bookstore aisles. These were the moments where I truly shed the last vestiges of my guarded past. With Kathy, I could be entirely myself, analytical yet vulnerable, quiet yet deeply feeling. She saw all of me, and in her eyes, I found acceptance. One evening, as we sat in a small cafe, the steam from our tea curling around us, I found myself reflecting on the unpredictable turns my life had taken. The soft clinking of cups and hushed conversations around us provided a gentle backdrop to my thoughts. It's funny, I mused, stirring my tea. I spent so much of my life building defenses, believing that safety lay in predictability, in logic. I thought I knew exactly what I wanted, what I needed. I looked across the small, worn wooden table at Kathy, her dark eyes reflecting the warm cafe lights. And then you came along, this vibrant, chaotic force, and tore it all down. In the best possible way. Kathy reached across the table, her hand gently covering mine. Her touch was warm, reassuring. And I thought you were this rigid, unyielding block of ice, Carolyn. All numbers and no heart. A soft laugh escaped her, a sound that now brought a quiet joy to my chest. Turns out, you just needed a little warmth to melt the surface. She squeezed my hand lightly. We both found something we weren't looking for, didn't we? Her words resonated deeply. This connection wasn't something I had sought out or logically planned for. It had found me, unexpectedly, in the most unlikely person, healing wounds I hadn't known I carried. Kathy had taught me that vulnerability wasn't a weakness, but a profound strength. She had shown me the beauty in trusting intuition, in embracing the messy, unpredictable flow of life, even when the data didn't neatly align. Through her, I had learned to connect with a part of myself I had long suppressed, to truly feel, to truly live. My perspective on everything had shifted. The world, once a series of quantifiable problems to be solved, now held a richer, more vibrant tapestry of emotions, experiences, and connections. My work, while still precise, felt infused with a new purpose, a deeper understanding of the human element behind the numbers. Our story wasn't a neatly tied-up package, a finished product with a definitive end. It was an open horizon, a continuous journey of discovery. We were two individuals, once diametrically opposed, now walking hand in hand towards an unknown future. Our differences no longer a source of conflict, but a source of strength and mutual growth. We understood that challenges would come, both personally and professionally. But now, we face them together. Our bond a quiet testament to the capacity to transform, to challenge, and to offer a path to a beautiful, evolving life, one unspoken understanding at a time. The possibilities, I realized, were endless.